to do isn't to punch them, isn't to talk to them. There's only one way you get respect, and that's by looking somebody in the eye for 60 minutes. Go out there, hitch up your trousers and say, hey, baby, here I am now. Let me see you run through me now. Let me see you show some disrespect for me when I'm nose on your nose. Let me see what you think of me now that my face is to you. We talk about respect. We're talking about respect around the country. There's one thing that we want more than anything else, and that's respect.
Welcome to another podcast of Talking Irish, and that introduction was a locker room speech by the great Lou Holtz. This week, Notre Dame's facing an old rival in Michigan, and this will be the last matchup for a number of years to come, so it's a pretty big game. So we're going to start off by doing a quick preview of what we're going to look for and what our expectations are for this Saturday evening. This Saturday will be the 41st time that Notre Dame and Michigan will match up. The Wolverines do hold a 23-16 lead with one tie. And, of course, the Irish won last season in a close one, 13-6, and when they forced 6 turnovers against Denard Robinson and the Michigan Wolverines. These are two powerhouses in folklore history of college football. Notre Dame has 11 contestants national championships, while Michigan has 9. Notre Dame has 866 career FBS victories, for third on the all-time list, while Michigan leads the all-time list with 904. I will make a sub-note that the Wolverines played 9 more seasons than the Irish. They started off 9 years before Notre Dame did. Notre Dame actually first opponent was against the Michigan Wolverines, a match that the Michigan Wolverines did win. Overall, the Fighting Irish own a winning percentage of .7339, 866 wins, 301 losses, and 42 ties. Good for number 2 all-time of NCAA winning percentage in college football. Of course, the number 1 team is the Michigan Wolverines with a winning percentage of .7341 and a record of 904 wins, 315 losses, and 36 ties. So there is no lack of history of football greatness between these two teams and these two programs, and there's definitely no lack of interest between the rivalry between these two. Both teams are 1-0 to start the season. Notre Dame beat Temple on a pretty easy win last weekend. Michigan is also 1-0 after a 59-9 rout over Central Michigan. That claim was probably not even as close as that if you had an opportunity to see it. Overall, Notre Dame should match up well. Michigan did very well against Central Michigan last week. For the last number of years, Denard Robinson has been the face of the Wolverines program up until last year when he was playing quarterback and then came out of that position 5 games in and was replaced by current Michigan quarterback Devin Gardner, who took over last season after for the last 5 games, I should say, in 2012. And in those 5 games, he passed for 1,219 yards, 11 touchdowns versus 5 interceptions. He is a dual-threat quarterback with some solid talent, and that was definitely on display last week, where he had 2 touchdowns for 52 yards on the ground alone. He can run his passing. He did have 2 interceptions last week, so he is vulnerable. Overall, the Michigan team was more of a rushing team last week, had 6 rushing touchdowns with 242 yards on 47 carries for an average of 5.1 yards per carry, but their total offensive output was 463 yards. Devin Gardner ran mostly the shotgun and the pistol formations, even though Michigan coach had told us earlier in the summer that they were going to be more of a power run football team. Although they did run, they are definitely, I wouldn't say a power run football team from what I saw last week. After Devin Gardner, the backup is a true freshman. Shane Morris was a 4-star recruit coming out of high school, and quite frankly, with Devin Gardner's play style of kind of running quite a bit, there's a chance if he does go down, you'll see a true freshman coming in to play. Their offensive line lost 3 starters from last year, but they do return both tackles who have pretty good experience. At left tackle, Ryan McChrystal is probably one of, if not the best tackles in college football. However, their middle 3 are brand new to starting football at the college level, so their center and guards are pretty inexperienced, and some of that showed last week. Even though they dominated the game, the center looked a little out of place at times. Lewis Nix should have a field day with this young man, and really should be clogging up the middle quite well. Devin Gardner does have some talent on the outside, though they are inexperienced and young. They do play they did play 7 wide receivers and 5 tight ends last week, so they did get some work on besides just the regular starters. Their leading receivers are returning wide receiver Jerry Gallon, and their tight end is also a returner, but the rest of the receivers are pretty young. Defensively, they actually saw 15 different linemen take the field last week against Central Michigan, and they did a fairly good job holding them to 210 total yards of offense. They did what most teams would probably do in a situation of a blowout, is get a lot of different players in, see some different matchups, and opportunity to get their young guys in. And so I think, like most teams, are still kind of feeling out who's going to play where, which I would think would be a benefit to Notre Dame's offensive line. Michigan also put 27 freshmen on the field last week. 11 of those were true freshmen, and 16 were redshirt freshmen players. So I assume that they're looking to see what their talent level is at that level and get some work in early in the season when you're going up against a team that you should be winning. Again, offensively, they're going to look very similar in terms of the Denard Robinson team, in the sense of you have a dual threat quarterback that can pass and run, which I think Notre Dame did a good job with in the past once they figured it out 2 years ago. I think there's an opportunity to do the same with Devin Gardner. It may come down to as simple as contain Devin Gardner, win the game. During some of Kelly's interviews this week, he definitely spoke very highly of Devin Gardner. He actually compared him to Randall Cunningham, which is a little bit different than facing Robinson. Gardner does throw with a little bit more accuracy, at least that's what Kelly said, and that he pushes the ball down the field a little bit easier. He does scramble, but probably not quite as well as Robinson did, but he is definitely a solid dual threat quarterback. It doesn't, I wouldn't be concerned or impressed that he did have 2 interceptions last week. What would scare me a little bit is how he responded. He seemed to respond very well, shaking them off and stepping up and continue to play well. So it appears even in an early victory against Central Michigan, he doesn't get rattled too easily. Of course, that may change a little bit if his inexperienced and overmatched interior offensive linemen are overpowered by Notre Dame's front 3 and the likes of Lewis Nix is coming down on him on a regular basis. He may end up thinking a little bit differently as he looks downfield this Saturday evening. Overall, this Michigan team is not any sort of surprise for starting quarterback Tommy Rees. He has played them before. Last year, he stepped in after Everett Golson threw 2 interceptions and solidified their win last year for the Irish. So I would think Tommy Rees would be semi-confident going in there, even though he's going to have 115,000 Wolverine fans rooting against him. I think he will not be rattled because of that. They do have a pretty decent secondary. The word is that is probably their better strength on defense. However, I think our offensive line matches up so well against their defensive line, I would think he has some good time to sit in the pocket to make good decisions. If not, I would think our running game should be able to take over fairly well. Again, you're looking at a Michigan team that held their opponent to just 210 yards of total offense, but we are talking about Central Michigan, not the likes of Notre Dame, even with an unproven backfield at this point. I would say both teams are at a similar place at this point in time. One win over teams that they definitely should have beaten, working in some younger players, still feeling themselves in regards to who can play where at what times. I would think both have got to feel pretty confident in some of their play, still developing some of their areas. So I think both of them come in with a very similar attitude, which should make for a very impressive game. I know some people made some issue over the fact that Brian Kelly didn't necessarily consider to be one of Notre Dame's historic rivals. I think he may be just trying to downplay that, and Brian's pretty focused on the game at hand, the time at hand. Not that he doesn't respect the history of these two teams. However, I think he realizes Michigan could have won the last 100 games, or Notre Dame could have won the last 100 games. It really doesn't matter when it comes down to this Saturday. That's the one that he's focused on, and I take it pretty much no more, no less than that. I'm not even sure that will be any kind of bulletin board material for Michigan. I think they're pretty focused as well, and I think they would understand where he's coming from. Overall, I think maybe their specialty players may have a bit of an advantage on us overall athletically. However, I think both our offense and defensive lines should dominate theirs in the trenches, and that's where a lot of games can be won. If we can get a little bit of a passing game going, and if our running backs continue to play, I say, as well as they did last week, and continue to grow, I would feel that the Irish have a very good chance of walking out of Ann Arbor with a victory. If this does come down to a close game, one concern I would have is our kicking game going 0 for 2 in field goals last week against Temple. Does not exactly put a lot of confidence that if we have to kick a field goal to win or to stay in this game, it would make me a little bit nervous. I'm not sure it would come down to that, and hopefully the necessary adjustments have been made for that would not be an issue this Saturday. If it becomes a pound run game for the Irish, I think we have a lot of talent back there. I think the question is who is going to carry the load to keep the ball secure. I like Cam McDaniel in that sense. I think he's shown that he's very tough. Overall, I expect the Fighting Irish to be 2-0 after Saturday's matchup against the Wolverines. I do invite you to join Talking Irish at Shamrock Jacks this Saturday evening for another great evening of football with true Irish fans down by Seabreeze in Rochester, New York. And until then, as always, go Irish.